notice that.
Oh, it was awful.
I didn't notice anything.
And I didn't shave.
And you know, I'm hypersensitive to Tourette's, but I didn't.
Oh, it was terrible. I kept looking at myself and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be very, very, very conscious of not making faces this time on camera. So, hello and welcome to Embraced.life. This is Steve, and you have entered the Human Interactive Lounge. That's what we call this. Do you like that? We like human interaction. It's very nice during this period of time of COVID. Human interaction is important. I am joined today by my good friend, Mayor Connor. And how long can I take off my jacket? I mean, this is really, really formal, and I don't like to be very formal. Do I wear a jacket when you and I do our talk?
I don't know, you might have.
I don't think I should dress up. There you go. So how long do you think we've known each other?
I think it's been close to 10 years.
That's a long time.
Yes.
But you're still around knowing me after 10 years. Most would have already fled. Yeah, Renee has been here 27, but she's doing time. She's hoping to advance to probation and get out of here. Yeah, 10 years. We first met when I did a talk. I think I was probably going through chemo at the time. Did I have hair?
That I don't remember.
I don't know if I did.
That's going back.
I think I did. I think I was probably doing chemo because I remember Randy saying that we were going to pray for me. So I don't know what talk I gave or if it was any good because I think I was too drugged up.
Well, it was good because that's why I looked you up later.
This was
I was impressed.
A camp that you have been to for years for foster youth.
Yes.
Royal Family Kids Camp. And after that, we kind of got off on a tangent in our time together because you also are a teacher.
Yes.
You teach where?
Well, I am retired now.
Yay!
So I was teaching at South Fork School in Weldon, which is up in the Lake Isabella area.
Yes, for those of you that are not part of the state of California, that's far away from here and in a very small town, right?
Yes.
It's
very rural, very low income.
Underserved community.
Yes.
And you taught what grade?
I taught first grade and kindergarten throughout most of my 25 years there.
Wow. 25 years with little ones.
Yes.
Dang. You thank you for your service to our country. That's a big deal. For sure.
It was challenging at times, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about how a lot of people don't see commonality with regards to what I do, kind of the mental health side, and what you do, which is the teaching side. How we kind of live in a culture of compartmentalization. But what was super cool is somehow you and I both realized that there is a similarity because teachers are like first contact of mental health providers for their students. I mean, a teacher's mental health is so incredibly vital to teaching, right?
Yes.
I think that the teacher's own innate health comes across. You know, we try to teach teachers. There's probably lots of professional development courses for teachers about classroom management and how to. Do you guys get courses on how to maintain calm, cool, and collected?
No, not for us personally. We might get some training on how to deal with some situations with the students who aren't mentally stable or going through something, but as far as our own personal mental health, not so much.
Yeah. So what is it that makes it, what do you think makes a different classroom experience for their students?
Well, I think that the teacher really has to know their students, has to try to get to know them personally, their family issues, the dynamics that they're living under, their just everything that is that child when they come in, especially at 5 years old, when I would first get them in kindergarten. So, as
Because it's all
soon,
new to them.
right, for most of them, especially in our area, they have not even been to preschool. Many are not churchgoers, so they haven't been in Sunday school classes or, those kinds of environments with other children. So lots of times their socialization was underdeveloped, and it was a matter of teaching them simple manners and rules of interacting with other students, sharing, those kinds of things. I know the saying, "What did you learn in school today?" And the response would be sharing.
Yeah.
But seriously, especially in the beginning of the school year, taking turns, sharing that another person's feelings are just as important as yours, those kinds of issues. I found myself doing a lot more of that than the academics for at least the first 2 or 3 months of school.
So you are the, I'm just thinking about this. Maybe I should see a teacher for every grade because I'm curious about the advancement of what it is a student needs to learn. So you're kind of the ground floor of community development.
Exactly. And that was one reason why
Did you like that?
I
you're the front line, community development.
yes. One of the reasons why I insisted on arranging my physical space in the classroom in small groups, and even purchased my own tables, round tables, so that the students would interact in their little pods, their little groups. And
so it wasn't set up with individual desks?
Not individual desks, or our school had the double desk where they would be sitting side by side, and it just wasn't as right. It wasn't as conducive as the round table, so I purchased my own and became really good model for developing collaborative thinking and work together. And the children really, they owned their group. They named it at the beginning of the year. They worked together to name their group.
I'm just curious, what were some of the names?
There were color tables, so they had to kind of go off the color tables. So, of course, green turtles, green frogs, blue whales, red apples, those kinds of things. But I have to say, one year I had a student who was a very high thinker, and his group was yellow, and he wanted to be the yellow experts.
The yellow experts.
Yes. So I would find a graphic that would go with their name to hang over their table, and yeah, I think I had some kind of little nuclear looking thing for yellow experts. But anyway, they were referred to often as a group name and working together. And
so that's kind of where the whole bonding begins.
Yes.
Putting them together at these pods.
Yes. And if I didn't have to move a student out of their group, but sometimes, the dynamics aren't as well as you would want them to be between a couple of students. It was hard for them to become part of a new group.
Yeah.
And a new group name. So anyway, It was part of their identity in the classroom, their group identity.
And how many kids would you have in a class?
When we had class size reduction, I was able to go down to, I usually had like 18 and 20, but then when they changed the rules a few years down the road and you just had to average between K and third grade, my last year teaching, which was year before last, I had 27, and 8 of them were the transitional kindergartners, so they're a whole nother little breed.
Wow. That's before kindergarten.
Yes.
And it was a combo?
Yes.
Wow. Because
of being a small school, we have lots of combinations. So for several years, I was a TK kindergarten.
And how did the kindergartners adjust to bringing in small fries?
They often wanted to treat them much younger than they were and baby them, and so I had to help them see that those, even though they were younger, those students kind of needed to catch on to school life procedures and sitting still and some of those things that we unjustly do to
Yeah.
4 and 5 year olds.
Wow. And the talking about the community that you taught in, the behavioral needs that these kids had, because they didn't come from a family with other siblings. Maybe they came from a family that had a mom or a dad and then a grandma and a grandpa as well. So they're entering in a whole new realm of there's kids their age.
Yes, that was always a challenge for many of them. Again, the whole issue of being part of a bigger whole and learning how to function in that way, learning what's appropriate behavior towards other people, and even respecting, the teacher and the rules of the school. Lots of instability for our population. Lots of changes in their home life, parents being incarcerated and taken away. Uh, some of the children had been in short term, maybe foster care or at Jameson, and then back. Many being raised by grandparents, and some even by great grandparents.
Wow.
So, step brothers and sisters coming in. We often had families of 4 children in our school, but each child had a different last name because they had a different father. And so that, of course, means a lot of instability and different challenges, of course, single moms.
But that age group is so in need of consistency.
Yes, and that is why I felt like having a lot of procedures in place, a lot of things that the children knew were going to happen every day, the schedule. Really, children thrive off of that.
Yeah.
They love having a schedule. They love knowing what's coming, especially for groups of children who may have even experienced homelessness. Working with the foster kids in the camp that you referred to earlier, often we found that those children, they were constantly asking like when they eat next and when the next meal was and then when we had a snack, and because they didn't always know where the next meal was going to come from.
Wow.
And I found with my school children that there was also that issue with food, that if we didn't serve them for some reason or we ran out, and I had to reassure them, I'm going to go find more, we will get what you need, because they don't have the food in their homes.
Right.
On a consistent level. So the summer school programs of still serving children food, and also during the COVID time, was really important. So it was a balance between acknowledging the physical needs that haven't always been met for these children and trying to meet those as a school system, and their emotional and social needs as well. So
Yeah.
it's a big job teachers have.
Yeah, I was I don't know if you remember this time, there was a huge fire up in your neck of the
Yes.
woods, and a lot of these kids would live in mobile homes
Yes.
with mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, great grandma and grandpa, multi-generational in a mobile home, and their whole community was wiped out by this fire.
Yes, and that was in my school district.
Yeah.
So we had many displaced children, and we did our best. We held actually a little summer school camp for a week that tried to address the trauma from that the following summer. But during that summer, when the fire was over before school started, I organized just a fun day for all the kids to come to the school, and we just had a big outdoor thing.
This was the year after?
Well, this was the summer of that happening that I did this event, this one-day event, and it was just so the kids could get their minds off of
Do you
what
remember
had
your
happened.
phone call to me?
No.
So you called and you said, well, the school's thinking about having our local fire department come with a fire
Okay.
truck and show the kids the fire truck. And you asked, what do you think about that as far as their mental health? And I said, I think it might be too soon. I think that the trauma might be too close. And I don't know if it was then that you and I started talking about the kids and their thinking, because this traumatic event really kind of stirred up a lot of their thinking, because it wasn't something that was ever expected. It wasn't something that made sense to them. And having a fire engine sounds like a great idea, but that soon after the fire, I thought it would be really disruptive to their thinking.
Yes, and after having that conversation with you,
You didn't invite
we
them.
we agreed. And really, when the school year started that year, so many of the children, that's all they could talk about was the fire, and they would speak to me about it as if maybe I didn't know it had happened.
Wow.
Mrs. Connor, there was this big fire, and my neighbor's house burned down, and just so many different issues. And of course, we wanted to meet any of the trauma the children were going through, and let them talk about it.
Yeah, I think that trauma for me in what I do really affects people's thinking, right? Because it's not common, it's not something you really prepare for, it's trauma. And the thinking factor that, people kind of take for granted as always being going along, and our thinking is just kind of um, smooth sailing, or you know, I don't know, straight, linear, and then the trauma comes, and then you get a major blip in the radar, and so many emotions that come out. And I don't know if it was then or our work before that we thought it would be a good idea. I shared this book with you about thinking and little guys, and I thought, well, I wonder if maybe you could use maybe you could use this. That was not an earthquake, Mayor. This is not a traumatic event. Please stay calm. One of our cameras, Renee, God bless my wife. The Yeah, so the book I thought was a good idea. I don't know, maybe you can share what it is you did with this book.
Well, I've done a few things with the book, and I'm just going to lift it up here. What is a thought? A thought is a lot, by Jack Pransky. And it has been such a help with me in my job. And one of my job titles that I accepted in my last few years was being
Besides a teacher?
besides a teacher, was being what we call a teacher in charge.
Oh.
And that means when our principal is not in the area,
Mm-hmm.
that another teacher is handling big issues that happen, mostly of which would be discipline issues with students. And so in having to call in students who had a different kind of disruptive incident or something in the school, so it wasn't just small things that a teacher was handling in her classroom, but other kinds of issues that were a little bit more intense, fights or whatever. I really began to adopt a lot of the ideas in this book and go through different pages in the book with the children.
So you would go over it with the kids.
I would go over it with the kids, either with actually the book or the things that I had taken out from the book that I felt were instructive at the time with the students. So the idea that a thought is a lot really served these students well, because a lot of them, as we spoke earlier about traumas they had been through, or things in their home that were maybe not mentally healthy, that they had experienced ways of dealing with issues that were unhealthy in a sociological
Right.
point of view, really made this book important to help children realize that what they are thinking affects then their feelings, and from their feelings their behavior. So I wanted to share one story in particular with a fourth grader who had very frequent outbursts in the classroom. Outbursts in the sense of angry moments where he would pick up chairs and throw them in the classroom, or start destroying things, or
You're describing my childhood. My parents might be watching and
Yeah.
saying, "Did you teach Steve?" No, it's a long time ago. Yeah, I'm too old.
So if you can imagine a scenario like that with a teacher who is trying to teach her class,
Oh.
she's got 25 other students in there. Of course, it disrupts the lessons. The child's out of control. They're becoming a harm to themselves or others in the classroom. So they were needing to remove the child. So usually they sent him to the office, and I would get a phone call if I was teacher in charge. So this one particular afternoon that this happened, brought the student in, and of course, being a small school, we all have a rapport with students already. So he was very familiar with me, and so once he came in, calmed himself down enough to be able to focus on me and my discussion with him.
So when he's referred up to you, that's probably when he knows the jig is up.
Right. And he is also very upset still.
Yeah.
And mad and angry, and he'd come in like sweaty and, just beside himself. So getting him, like I said, to calm down, sit down, we're just going to talk about it. Of course, I'd lower my voice. I'd have a very soft demeanor with him to try to diffuse his temper. So then we'd start talking about what exactly happened in the classroom, what was going on. So he would tell me he got mad, and in this particular instance, he was mad at a student who had said something about his mother, a derogatory comment, of course, to upset him, but this student was very easily triggered by these kinds of things, which is why this other student did it. But he was also very mad at the teacher for kicking him out of the classroom. And so he started talking about how the teacher hated him. She hates me, she hates me. And so I started going through his thought pattern on that. I know this teacher very well. She's a good friend of mine. Do you think that she really hates you? Well, she kicked me out of class. Okay, what were you doing in the classroom? Well, I was really mad and I was throwing things around. And okay, what do you think her job is at school? Well, to teach us. And are you included in that group? Yes. Was she able to teach while you were doing these things? No. Were you able to learn from her while you were doing these things? No. So really, maybe you could change your thought of her hating you as someone who cares. She cared about the other students and she cared about you. And her attempt to teach you was interrupted. So in order for her to serve the other students, she needed to remove you from the class and let you calm down. So what if you thought of her as a caring adult instead of someone who was trying to do something horrible to you? Do you think that's a possibility? Yeah. Do you think she loves you like she loves the other students? Yes, she does. Okay. So now you can look at the situation a little differently. You were removed from class in order for you to be calmed down. The other students can continue learning. And, that that could change your behavior. What if you thought about that at the time when she asked you to calm down? What if you thought, she really cares about me and she thinks about the others? Do you think you would have felt better? You wouldn't have been so angry. Yeah. Do you think then, if you weren't so angry, you would not have thrown things around and you never would have been kicked out of class? Maybe you could have learned. Yes. And then we went into thinking differently about what the other student had said. And that comes down to one of the issues in the book that I think is so important, and that is teaching our students about the power of thoughts. So I just wanted to read the page where it talks about the power of thoughts. And then again, I have just a little short story, if I may, about my students and how I taught this to kindergartners. So on page 5,
this is story time. I love story time,
which I love doing as a kindergarten teacher. I love telling stories and reading books.
My level of understanding is kindergarten.
Yes. So this page says, thoughts have power. Power for what? Power to move you, power to fight, power to be peaceful with all of your might, power to love, power to hold, power to do whatever you're told or not. The next page goes into, power to be scared and some of the more negative things. But here's how I use this in my classroom with the students. If another student, it often happens in kindergarten, I don't know why, but they like to get under each other's skin. And again, they're in these little pods, so to speak, at their tables. And they would be coloring, and another student would tell a student their coloring was ugly. And so then, of course, they're going to tattle to me. He said, my coloring is ugly. So then I'd ask them, well, what do you think about your coloring? Do you like your coloring? Well, yes. Okay, then why would you want to give your power over to the other student? And then, of course, I'd have to explain that to you, because you are allowing what they say to make you feel bad. That's giving away your power to feel good about yourself because you think your coloring is good.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what they say, doesn't mean it's truth. It might be truth for them, but it's not truth for you. If you're happy with what you're doing. So you know what you could turn to them and say in response? Well, I like my coloring. Simple.
Kind of like they're keeping their power with them.
That's right. So I would use this kind of language with them quite often. He made me mad. Nobody makes you mad unless you give them the power.
Wow.
So, I would go through these kinds of conversations with them. So they were very used to me using this kind of language. And sometimes I would hear them say, you can't have my power. And it was great that they had really embraced the concept. One time in particular, I had a parent conference, and the dad came to the conference, and he had, again, a very higher thinking, deep thinking son in my class. And they were a very verbal family. Mom and dad with their son. He was an only child. And in fact, when an administrator asked him one day, do you have any brothers or sisters? He said, no, but we're trying. So this was obviously they communicated a lot in their family. So the father asked me, he said, Xander talks a lot about giving away his power, and how you have taught them not to do that. Could you explain that to me? What have you, intended in teaching him that? And so I explained this concept with him. And he loved it and felt like that would be then language that they would continue at home with him on power or not. And he was kind of a tattler, so he would come home and talk about
the child, not the dad.
Right, the child. And he would talk about maybe what a student had done and he could be prone to being worked up and upset with what another child said. And so his father would talk with him about not giving his power away. So I
So it was-
found that
it
really
wasn't just
instructive.
it was reinforced at home because the dad understood it.
Exactly.
That's very cool.
Exactly. And I would just say that you might think a 5-year-old cannot understand this kind of discussion or this language, but they have the capacity to really embrace a lot, especially if there's a change in their thinking, that paradigm shift that we speak about. If they have always thought, like, if somebody says something to me, I have to be upset about it, you know, they've hurt my feelings, the whole idea of telling someone you've hurt me on the inside, which happens, of
Right.
course, but having them go through their thinking and how they could change their thinking. And obviously, if you change your thinking and your feelings, you're going to change your behavior and how you respond to somebody.
Right.
And so I just found that, you know, really important. On page 13, it talks about what if something else could be thought of instead, which is what I would try to encourage the students to do. If we listen to thoughts that come from deep inside, thoughts that don't harm, thoughts that are wise, we won't get into trouble, we won't do any harm, we will only be feeling the power of calm. So just this past Monday, I was with my granddaughters, and the middle child tends to get very easily upset by the older sister, especially because that sister likes to grab things away from her. And her response is to try to bite, because the older sister definitely doesn't like to be bitten.
Huh?
And she'll be screaming, don't bite me, don't bite me. But that is the, you know, initial response of this middle child when she gets that upset. So I kind of scooped her up in my arms as she went in for the bite. And you know, moved her away. I acknowledged.
Did you get
No,
No.
She doesn't bite me.
Okay, good.
I acknowledged, you know, that she was angry, that what her sister had done was not nice and kind, and that I knew she was angry, but that biting was not the correct response. That's why we have words. But then also in that, I redirected, which of course we know teachers need to do, and I said, well, let's think about something happy instead of the thoughts you're having right now and being mad at your sister. So we were going to gymnastics class later, and I said, let's talk about gymnastics class. What's your favorite thing to do there? And again, her whole mood shifted. I kind of took her out of the situation. We had sort of a cuddle moment where we could talk about some good thoughts. And then she went back into the playroom and she was fine with her sister. So, you know, teaching, we don't want to take away a child's feelings. I mean, definitely, we need to acknowledge them. But when they have control over those feelings, which we do, and it is a matter of thought, I think that we serve our children well by teaching them that what goes on in their head is in their control.
Yeah.
And then what comes out of their mouth or their behaviors are also under their control, and nobody ever makes them do anything. And I think as adults, so often we say, they made me mad,
Right.
or I responded that way because he cut me off.
Right.
Well, you know,
What
we
are the
could think
choices?
differently.
Well, I liked
about
what
that.
you said with your first story about the boy considering the possibility, right? It wasn't a directive. You need to think different.
Right.
No, it was, what if there was another way? What if there's another possibility? So it was subtle in the delivery, right? Because it sounds like the boy in the adult world had a big ego at the moment.
Yes.
And by telling somebody that has a big ego, you need to think differently, well, you're coming up against that ego and it might not go so well. But when you are subtle and say something like, hey, what if there's another possibility? That kind of goes under the radar.
Right. And we tend to have quite a handful of boys in our population at the school that are very aggressive, and when they're upset, they do turn to a lot of physical violence. And whether it's learned in the home or where it's come from, we don't usually have control over, but what happens in the school environment, we do. And of course, we have to keep control for the safety of everyone concerned, but also, again, trying to encourage the development of a healthier mental perspective on things. And I have just found that the, in working with these particular boys, that the last thing you want to do is start, pointing your finger at them and giving them those. Number one, it just agitates them more. You become the new enemy.
Do it because I said so.
Right. And going through that, showing them the respect that they have not been showing in their classroom towards their teacher or the other kids, but dealing with them in that respectful tone, in that soft tone, letting them come to their own conclusions about things, but leading. Obviously, I was, asking leading questions, but it did help. And the more opportunities there were to work with those same students and remind them of some of the thought processes that they have and how they can change it, seem to make a change.
When you talk about the respect, what that sounds like to me is speaking to their health, right? Knowing as a teacher that they have the ability within them, that they have that health inside of them to make better choices. And so giving them the respect is really seeing the potential that they have inside of them.
Right, and helping them own their consequences. And of course, we offered many positive consequences in the school environment. And a lot of these students were always missing out on those. So,
Right.
talking with them, I often had the class of children who didn't get a particular activity that was a reward for good behavior. I would have them gathered in my classroom while the other students were enjoying those things outside or whatever. And we would talk about this, how they could change their behavior
Right.
in order to earn it the next one, what needed to happen, how they could respond differently when these certain triggers that seem to be catching them up constantly, and keeping them out of these things, how these triggers could be eliminated.
So just in
Right,
coming
through
to
thought.
you, your approach to them allowed their thinking, their higher quality of thinking to rise to the surface because you created an environment that wasn't adversarial. Here they are coming referred to you, so they're really, really uptight, but then greeting them with the knowledge that they have potential and they have hope kind of calm them down. And it sounds like they were really able to see for themselves, oh yeah, just in sitting here, my thoughts have changed. I've reduced the level of anxiety and tension and frustration. And the only way that that kind of feeling can change is because the mind has quieted down. So you recognizing, man, how much healthier it is for these kids to operate from a quieter mind versus a really busy mind. Do you want to share the story about our end of the year with the parents?
Oh, our family dinner nights.
Yeah.
Sure. So, in looking back over a lot of my years of teaching and the feeling that in the school itself, we were often complaining about parents and their lack of raising their children well. I decided that instead of complaining, maybe I could do something about that in an instructive. So for my kindergarten class, I started what I called family dinner nights, and it was based on the principle of families gathering together at a dinner time, and statistics show how much better the future of children are who do this at least 3 times a week with their families, discussions, socializing, getting to know each other, those kinds of things. And anyway, I had a 8-session class. So every 2 weeks, I would prepare dinner for the families, and they would come as a family
To
to my
the school.
classroom. Yes. I would, decorate it seasonally, make it a real event for them. And I often had about 8 families would come. So I would teach on different topics or have someone else come in and teach. My daughter came in and taught some sessions on playing with your children and the benefits of that and those kinds of things. So I would have Mr. Steven come for our last session as a culminating activity and talk about mental health and mental wellness. Because I really appreciated the perspective Stephen takes on us dealing with mental wellness. And the parents really responded well
at
to
least
his teaching.
I was intimidated because a lot of times when I speak, that's not just at home, but people would zone out and get glossy eyed. But coming to your classroom, these parents were taking notes. These parents were asking questions. I was like, wait, what did I just say? You just wrote something down. They were so engaged.
They were, and I think that goes to the fact that they hadn't had that opportunity before to learn good parenting skills, to learn what to do with that child that does throw tantrums at home. And of course, you spoke about, not jumping in the pit with them, which I know you have other video about the helicopter in the pit, which was what really impressed me the first time that I saw you teach that lesson. And that, the parents had choices in how they were thinking
Right.
about their children and the possibilities that their children weren't just having a tantrum to have a tantrum, but what is underlying those kinds of issues. And anyway, so
it was so cool that 1 year that we had that end of the year parent dinner. The kids were in the room and the kids were teaching the parents the what is a thought book. The kids were talking about how they had learned that throughout the year about their thinking, and that was great because I didn't have to do any talking. They were so much better because I think that when you get it for yourself, these kids got it for themselves, and so they spoke their own language of how it is they got it, and the parents were like, wow, that's crazy. And the parents probably throughout the year had heard, like you said, they had heard bits and pieces of it, but at the end of the year to see the whole thing come into full view, that was amazing.
Yes, and I felt very privileged to be able to bring those new concepts to families really in need, and children really in need.
I was blubbering down the hill thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. Yes. This is where it starts. This is the rock in the pond, and the ripples you could visibly see that it went from, we're going to build a community at these tables, these round tables, but then we're now going to build a community with the families, and now I just can't imagine how that's not going to create a community of wellness.
And I think another part of that for me was trying to communicate to the parents that we're all here for the kids,
right?
That we're a partnership. And that I think sometimes parents are intimidated, again, because of our population. A lot of the parents didn't finish high school, they have their own struggles in school, and they're very intimidated by teachers.
Yeah.
And even to come to parent conferences, we would have to work very hard in building a
So
rapport.
their thinking was similar to that little boy getting called to the school. And I think that, again, with that little boy, creating the environment of well-being, of calm, and here we are having like dinner, right, with the teachers having dinner with the parents, the mental health person is having dinner with the parents, just inviting them to have a conversation, inviting them to our table, right, that they probably never got invited to before. And just by doing that, you I could visibly see their thinking change. I could see how it shifted, and the parents that would come up to me afterwards were so grateful. They never thought of thinking the way they now did. They were so incredibly thankful to their kids learning this, and they talked about how they were going to start using this in their home. That was amazing.
Yes, would run into the parents after this program, and they would say, you know, we're still playing together. We have game night on Friday nights now, and the kids just love it. And just, you know, so many of those kinds of things that they just weren't in their wheelhouse before, that
Right.
we were able to give them, and really empower the parents also to
It
know
was
that they have a part in their children.
it was crazy how I had come up. I don't know how many times I went up for parent night, parent dinner with you, but it was multiple times that the same parents were in the class that were there the last year, and I was thinking, did you not graduate kindergarten? But they had other kids
Right.
that were now in your class, or they just remembered last year what it is they got, and they wanted to come back. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but I don't really teach anything different. I have said the same thing for years, but these parents were like, oh, I got something completely different than I did last year. And I could perform the same dog and pony show, and uh, because the parents' own thinking has changed, they're completely hearing a whole different thing for themselves. That was really cool.
Well, the evolution of a family and the development of children, just as they mature, changes the dynamics of the family.
Right.
And so we never stop learning.
No, we are active
Learners
versus fixed mindset learners, growth mindset learners. So thank you so much for coming down off the hill.
My pleasure.
Yeah, this is just an amazing opportunity for everybody to realize that school is a great place to begin growing a community and teaching these kids about their thinking. And if we could do that more often, if we could teach kindergartners about their own thinking, the amazing society that we would have, instead of it being, you made me this way, or the revenge factor, if everybody recognized that they are the thinkers, that nobody else thinks your thoughts, you think your own thoughts, and your thoughts make you, like you said, your thoughts cause you to feel a certain way, and those feelings are what are the result of your behavior. If the kindergartners that you've taught over the years could now take that message on forward, and the parents, the ripple effect of the community that you have built is amazing. So thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
So that wraps it up for our Facebook Live, the Human Interactive Lounge. I am Steve, and this is Mer. Show the book again. We want everybody to know that what is a thought? A thought is a lot, by, a good friend of mine, Jack Pransky, who we have spoken with before in other venues. But check it out, and start building a community of your own, where thinking is something that people recognize is a must do. You must think, and you get to choose those thoughts that you think. So I don't know. I'm supposed to. I'm gonna respond to your guys' comments. I got caught up and distracted. My ADD medication hasn't kicked on, but you were so engaging, and I was sitting here going, the teacher's talking, I have to pay attention. I had my hands folded in my lap like a kindergartner. I really wasn't playing. I wasn't playing with my fidget spinner that much. Yeah, so I will make sure and comment back to you guys that have shared. And thank you very much. Like, subscribe, follow the embraced.life. This has really been about embracing life in kindergarten. So thank you for coming. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
That wasn't bad. That was good.